Today I want to discuss. The subject of a documentary Once Upon a Time in Iraq. It's fairly new documentary about Iraq in general, but specifically after the invasion of United States at Saddam Hussein dictatorship, and then what happened that Iraq was a so chaotic country, and even in our times in 2025, Iraq, if we for example consider passport power, and this is a good example of how state is. Iraq is at the lowest third position from the bottom. So last is Afghanistan, then we have Syria, and then we have Iraq. So it's a fairly undeveloped and very destroyed country. And why is that? Well, first of all, of course, because the documentary show us that uh, no one in Iraq really liked Saddam Hussein dictatorship. Let's remember that he attacked with his army, so with Iraqis, two countries, Iran in the late 70s, and Kuwait in, let's say, late 80s, early 90s. So Iraqis participated in this war. Even though we say that his dictatorship and he attacked, but Iraqis were still killing Iranians and Arabs from Kuwait. And these two wars destroyed not only Iran and the Kuwait, but specifically Iraq, because he as a country it was depleted of men. About 500,000 Iraqi men died in a war with Iran, and probably 1 million was injured or badly or moderately. So we have a country plagued by violence, plagued by wars, and also, but beneath that is a far greater, far worse, dangerous thing. And what is it? It's of course division of Islamic religion. When Islam was founded. When Prophet Muhammad, who created Islam, died, Muslims were not sure who should be the ruler. And the tradition said that the first rulers were his closest companions. So first was Abu Bakr, then later was Omar or Umar, then third was Uthman, and fourth was Ali ibn Talib. But some of the Muslims, minority, about let's say 10%, said that those three first caliphs, even though they expanded Muslim caliphate, Muslim country, they were more like usurpers than rightful rulers, and only Ali of those four was a rightful ruler. Nevertheless, three of them were murdered by Muslims or someone close with the Muslim community. So even they are today revered by the Sunni Muslims, all four of them, as the greatest Muslims walking on earth after Muhammad. Still, they were murdered by Muslims. So these early Muslims didn't thought about them so greatly. Nevertheless, they were brilliant rulers. For example, in time of Umar or Omar, Jerusalem and Alexandria with Egypt has fallen to the Muslim rule. So they were very influential in creating this very humongous empire. And later in times, Muslims conquered today's modern day India and Bangladesh. to the borders of Bangladesh, and to the west they conquered almost whole Spain, and they even threatened France. And we know this we know this history, and we called it in great Arab conquests. But this division within Islam was still lingering between Sunnis and Shias, because Shias also believed that only Ali's descendants, so his two sons, who were also grandsons of Muhammad, because Ali married Fatima, the greatest daughter of Muhammad. And so Shias believed that only those offsprings, Hassan and Hussein, and their children, specifically Hussein, are uh, real caliphs. And when they called them not caliphs, they called them imams. And they believed that imams are people, or specific type of people, who are even greater than normal people, and that the companions of the prophet. And for the majority of Muslims, for the Sunnis, it is a great heresy, because Muslims are strict monotheists. They don't believe that Muhammad was in a way divine being. They said that he was fully human, not like, for example, Jesus Christ, who we as Catholics and as Christians generally consider that he was human but also a god. And Muslims think that Muhammad was a prophet, was the greatest prophet on earth, was the greatest person on earth ever living, but still he was just a person. And he could do, for example, some kind of divine action only because Allah as God allowed it. But Shias believed that those imams, those specific special people, have powers to also have this divine power. And this conflict is actual to this day. So, for example, we have, when Americans attacked Iraq and toppled Saddam's regime, everyone assumed that Iraqis would be happy, but it was not the case. Why? Because in Iraq, about 60% of population is believe in Shia Muslim, and 40% in Sunni Muslim, and they are indistinguishable. They are all Arabs. We have some Kurds on the north, but Kurds have different language, but they are in looking, they are very similar to Arabs. So this and Saddam was a Sunni Muslim, and he in a way favored Sunni Islam, even though he was not very religious person. And Shias in general in all Muslims lands were, as a minority and as a religious minority, were considered heretics, and they were also because of their beliefs, they were also punished and subjugated to different punishments and other difficulties. And right now, when Saddam is toppled, all Iraqis knew that if democracy will win, Shia will vote for Shia, Sunni will vote for Sunni. So Shias are the majority, and it is a greater majority. It's above 50%. They are like 60%. They will be ruling the next Iraq. So the civil war broke out between Sunnis and Shias, but and these narrations are very good. They are shown in a very specific way in this documentary Once Upon a Time in Iraq, because most of the narrators are Shia narrators. And this is interesting because most of them didn't use term Sunni Shia. So Muslims are aware that this is weakening the Islam. So they are using different terms. Like, for example, Shias using for Sunnis terms like Salafi. So someone who is a fanatical Muslim like Salafis. Or, for example, Sunnis don't use term Shia, they use the term of Rafida. So it's a derogatory term to say it to Shias. So they don't want to use the term Muslim, Sunni, or Shia, and we see that it's also interesting what they didn't want us to know and talk about in this documentary, because they all know that the chaos which we have even later, because for example, when American troops pull out from Iraq completely in 2011, ISIS as a radical Sunni organization was created specifically because of the Shias persecuting Sunnis, and this new war began anew. And it's still plaguing, for example, Iraq and Syria, even though in Syria civil war has ended and Bashar escaped, but in Syria, Shias are only I'm not sure, maybe 20%, something like that. So they are the minority, but in Iraq they are still the majority, and they still I think their government, Shia government, still rules. So we see that this war between Sunnis and Shias uh, was not welcomed in the Arab world, because they wanted to see that Americans are real aggressors. But of course, the aggression of Americans was not because they wanted to attack Iraq. They feared that something like 9/11 will happen again. And 9/11 was the most terrifying terror attack in our history, when Arab young men, 20, 25, something like that, Ali Akcha from Egypt was the oldest. They kidnapped the civilian airplanes, and they put them to crash with people on them to the most recognizable buildings in New York, Twin Towers, and in Pentagon, and in other very famous infrastructure in United States. Maybe about 3,000 people died, but they expected that many thousands will die in those Twin Towers. So it was really cruel and horrible attack. And we see that Arabs didn't change much, because, for example, 2 years ago they slaughtered 100,000 and 200 Jews in a very vicious, cruel, sadistic way, and they even recorded their murdering, and they even, for example, recorded not long ago how they are killing themselves, or those who they deemed being spies for Israelis in Palestine. So they are a really cruel, vicious, and barbaric people. For example, I'm from Poland, and there was the case when young Arab men drive about I don't know 300 kilometers. So it's exorbitant speed, and he ran over and killed father, mother, and their two children. And then he escaped, but he was caught and extradited to Poland. So we see that Arabs are really vicious and cruel people. In a very and they have very sadistic behavior, and they hate each other mostly on the lines of Sunni Shia. So we see the documentaries in this specific documentary, the recordings that ISIS members took some Shias from Iraq, from their own country, and they recorded their killings and throwing bodies to water. Maybe it was even Tigris or Euphrates. And they were murdering those young soldiers or candidate for soldiers. So we see that this this documentary is showing us that that religion, because right now in our times every religion wants to be a religion of peace, and of course it's not the case, because religion is what it needs to be to gather as many believers as this religion want. So if religion is sure that being a humanistic, a pacifistic religion is good, it will be humanistic and pacifistic. But if, for example, a need arise, the religion can participate in the most horrible violence we have ever seen. And in Muslim, it's also because Muhammad, he was not only a founder of religion like Jesus or Buddha, or writers of Hindus Vedas, but he was also a warrior. He was also a soldier, let us say. He married many women, and he participated in fighting. He was killing his own Muslim brothers, but for him they were polytheists, and he was a true believer, a Muslim. And in Mecca, because he was born in Mecca, and then Arabs still believed in polytheism, but because of his religion and his spreading of this religion and then his war, they won. So the Arabs who believed in polytheism lost, they were killed, and those Arabs who were monotheists, they have won, and they won in general. So this very interesting documentary, which you can watch on YouTube, is showing us that the religious hatred is a very serious problem even in our modern times. That religion can cause a great and horrible violence, unimaginable for people, because no one imagined, probably even in Muslim world, that some young Muslim men can kidnap and be so vicious and so fanatical that they will kidnap a civilian ship, and they will they will fly into the building with many thousands of people. And it was the case. It was even recorded when second, I think that even first plane was recorded, and second was recorded in general, that we could see. And most Muslims, of course, today don't believe that that the 9/11 happened, or that Arabs were doing it or Muslims were doing it. But it's normal that you don't want to say that you were participating or doing such horrible acts of violence. So, for example, we had a situation in Sri Lanka when young Sri Lankan Muslims, 25 years old, something like that, they put a bomb on themselves, and in our greatest, in a holy Sunday, they blow themselves up in many churches in Sri Lanka, even though Muslims and Christians are the minority, because my majority of Muslims in Sri Lanka are Buddhists, but nevertheless they are so I don't know, retarded, so vicious, that even though Christians were minority, they still blow them. 200 something people have been murdered, mostly women and children. And Muslim world just ignored it. Yes, like they are ignoring all violence, or all those horrible acts and all those war crimes and crimes in general. So they even in this documentary we see that Iraqis, they didn't want to tell much about this conflict, because they are aware that there should be peace when the rulings of Saddam Hussein was over, and it was not the case, because Iraqis didn't think about the peace; they thought about the rule, the power, who has the power. And of course, Sunnis believe that Shias are heretics, and Shias believe that Sunnis are just Muslim radicals in general. And of course there is only also the major issue, because in the beginnings of Islam, the favorite wife of Muhammad was Aisha, and Aisha was very young when he married her. He married her when she was about 6 years old. He consumed this no, let's say that he consumed his marriage when she was 9, but this is not controversial in Islam world. In Islam world, it's more controversial that Aisha was at odds with Ali, so with the Caliph, which for Shias is the most and the only righteous Caliph of all those first caliphs. So sometimes they even curse Aisha, and for most or majority of Muslims, Aisha is the most important wife of Prophet Muhammad. She was not the first, because the first was Khadija, but Aisha is the most favorite. And also Muhammad said that from all people on earth, he loved the most Aisha, and he even died in Aisha house with him on his dying hours. So for Sunni Muslims, she's almost like they don't have saints, but for them she's the most important woman in Muslim history. She's like mother to them. So this conflict has begun very early in Islam, and it is still brewing in Islam world. And I would say this is the most destructive force in Islam world. That this division between Sunni and Shia is far more greater than, for example, conflict between Jews and between Israelis and Palestinians in Palestine, between Iran and other countries, because this conflict of Iran and other Muslim countries is because the only Muslim country with nuclear power and nuclear rockets is Pakistan. But Pakistan is vehemently opposing India, not Iran. But because most Pakistanis are also very fanatical Sunni Muslims, Iran also wants to have a nuclear weapon, because it is the only country with Shia Muslims in all population. So there are almost no Sunni Muslims in Iran, and Iran is vehemently Shia, and he wants to spread the Shia version of Islam. So this is the case. So the most destructive force in Islam world, and Muslims don't want to they don't want to say it, but it is their own religion, or rather their own interpretation of their religion, because every religion can be destructive, positive, and it depends on our interpretation of religion texts. So we see that from this movie, that even though Iraqis were given freedom, they were given democracy, Saddam was a real cruel dictator. He probably was responsible for maybe 1 million Iraqis deaths, maybe 800, maybe 700, maybe 600, but still it's a very great number of people, of lives. But for them it's not a problem, because majority of Muslim countries, if not all, are not democracies. And they don't like democracy. They think this is a Western invention. For them, the caliphate is the most important one, the most recognizable governing role. But the caliphate is in a way also dictatorship. So it's still and most Muslim countries are dictatorships, and Muslims are also, they don't want to acknowledge what the reality really is. For example, the countries with lowest passport index are not even because they always at the bottom were African countries, and now because of this infringement interior war within Muslim world, the bottom countries are mostly Muslim countries, but not even but not from Africa. But for example, Iraq, for example, Syria, for example, Yemen, for example, Pakistan, for example, Afghanistan. So all of them are very very badly developed, and it is because Islam wanted to unite all those people from different cultures on the banner of Islam. But it was possible only on general level. On more specific level, it was impossible. And we see these consequences that Muslims can, for example, do some savagery act. They can, for example, murder some Muslims, some Christians, destroy some Buddha statues in Afghanistan or in Myanmar, but they are not able to. Bangladesh is also one of the lowest passport power countries. So and it is majority Muslim country. So we see that Muslims are aware of this, but they don't know how to change it. They also live in this state of illusion that everyone else is an enemy. Jews control everything, and Islam will bring for them past victories and also past splendor. But religion is only one aspect of human life, and because of our and the religion is as we will interpret it, because every religion can be interpreted. The interpretation of religion is multitude of ways how to interpret the religion. And we see that because Muslims are generally very right oriented, they generally are very very conservative, primitive. The death penalty in the Muslim world are broadly accepted. Violence, marrying children under even 12 years old is generally accepted. No one talks about it. They blowing themselves up in their own temples, Sunnis in Shia's temples, as we could see in Iraq and in Syria. So their religion, even though it's the second greatest religion in the world, has this issue, or rather the Muslims has these issues, and they don't know how to resolve them. And this example of this brilliant documentary Once Upon a Time in Iraq is showing us that even today, if we will see documentaries from Iraq, we see that okay, that they have some food on the streets, they live some kind of fairly good lives, but the buildings are collapsing. Everything looks destroyed, damaged, chaotic, and nothing is really pleasant. Yes, because they always smile, they always talk only positive things, and they sometimes behave in a very infantile way, in a very pretentious way. But we see that under that is this evil, demonic, even violence, as we, for example, see towards Jews in October massacre 2 years ago. So for Muslims, will be modern Muslims, it will be very difficult to create something positive, like good government countries, if all of those countries are in a state of chaos and delusion. So this documentary is showing us how dangerous each religion, even modern religions, can be if they are interpreted in a very primitive way. So let me know in the comments what do you think about this specific documentary.